Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome back to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping. This episode was inspired by the lack of inspiration, actually. I was looking around YouTube, trying to figure out, what do people think about ISTJs? What do ISTJs think about Myers-Briggs? And it's practically non-existent. I don't think I've met a single focused ISTJ that actually talks about ISTJs on YouTube besides myself. There are the occasional channels that'll say whoa, what do I think about ISTJs? Or how do ISTJs get along in marriage? But it's usually a secondary compared to everything else they do. They might say, here's what I think about every other personality. But it's hardly ever focused on the ISTJ. There's so much you can learn from us, but yet YouTube is not the place to do it. If there is a place, cool. Just not YouTube. That's what I'm here to talk about today. This info dumping episode isn't necessarily how we think, what's going on in our brains when we're feeling sad, or how the heck do we handle rejection. This is going to talk about how do we handle basically being non-existent on YouTube. Well, in my personal experience, it definitely makes me feel like I'm the weird one, when usually ISTJs are the more sensible and level-headed people in the Myers-Briggs community. They're the least likely to break up or get out of a commitment because our introverted feeling is so low. So as a result, it tends to make us stick with our commitments even if we don't particularly like them. I know I've made several deals with someone. I'll name one right now, but I'll keep the person anonymous. She was getting concerned that I was talking to her more than she talked to her boyfriend, but because I'm not good with the Paul, I think we should talk less, as opposed to the Paul, I think we should only talk once a week, or once a month, or once every 3 days, structured approach, I simply said, well, okay, let me make a deal with you to make this a little bit more structured. I will not return my call to you until you say, Paul, you can return. What does that have to do with the lack of presence on YouTube? Because hardly anyone knows about that. As a result, most people probably don't even know that they're ISTJs when they are, or they think they're ISTJs, but they're actually not because they've only read the stereotypes. So I think that it's really unfortunate that most ISTJs don't really have a prominent YouTube presence, or at least if they do, they don't do a good job of communicating it. They need to tell the world about this hidden depth that we all possess. What exactly is going on with this introverted sensing and introverted feeling? Because it's introverted, why hasn't it come to the surface? People might say, you ISTJs are so shallow, to which I respond, I've written 4 novels, gotten a book published, written 3 walkthroughs, and a novelization of a game that's all about quantum physics. How is that shallow? But most ISTJs don't like talking about their accomplishments, so it's going to get largely ignored, or if it doesn't get ignored, then they're not likely to notice that it was an ISTJ that did it. Also, ISTJs that have done major contributions to society often go unnoticed as well. When I was doing my last Myers-Briggs video, which was an interview with my ENFP friend, I struggled to think of ENFPs or ISTJs that she would know of, because I was like, they're usually the cops or the detectives, and I struggled to think of a major political figure that was an ISTJ that made a huge difference in the world. But that's because ISTJs don't prefer to be the big name leaders out there. We prefer to be more behind the scenes. And maybe that's why we have such a low presence on YouTube, is because we don't want to draw all this attention to ourselves. We don't want people to know that we're actually huge crybabies on the inside, but hardly ever shed a tear. Some ISTJs can go over a year without crying. And I really think that's a shame, because I'm one of the few ISTJs that I believe that my introverted feeling, while not great, is in some ways a gift. And when I actually can put it to use, it leads to some surprising character depth moments. And while most of my good friends tend to see the introverted feeling right away, because I've learned to sort of like put that out more, because I used to be much more reserved than I used to be, but lately I've been like, it's okay to show how you feel about certain things, because most of my friends are feelers, so I've kind of adapted to being around them, and like how they're like, why must you be so darn logical all the time, or at least that's what they're probably thinking. The lack of ISTJ presence on YouTube, I think, hurts the most in the fact that I'm a gaming nerd. And so, while yes, I'd like to also see more ISTJs talk about the Catholic faith, I think it's especially detrimental in gaming because we're so good at like lists and compartmentalizing and talking about things in more of an orderly fashion. It really stinks that you don't have more ISTJs saying, hey, here's all 887 songs in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I'm going to rank every single one of them. And the thing is, most ISTJs that say they're going to do something, do it. Now, I know that's where I slightly break the stereotype, because there are definitely times when I procrastinate, and there are times when I'll say I'll do something, but I won't. But the difference between that and, like, say, the ENFP is that they'll forget because they come across a distraction. I won't forget. It's just that I'll think of a good reason why I should discontinue. Like, for example, I was totally dead set on doing my Sonic Mania playthrough. I have, all of it recorded. I beat the game and everything. Yet why have I only gotten as far as the Mirage Saloon Zone? I didn't think I had an audience for it. I wasn't going to waste time posting it on YouTube if I didn't think anyone would watch it. I mean, I might have gotten like 4 views at the most for one of my latest ones. So it wasn't so much procrastination, it was more of, I made these so that people could see them. That's like going to do a public speech and only one person shows up. It's just not worth it. You might as well cancel the speech. Or if I'm writing a book, but I don't have the confidence that it'll get published or that a lot of people will read it, I'll just be like, I don't really see the motivation in continuing this. But if it's something that I feel is important and something that I really think people will either get a lot out of or it'll help make a difference in the background, then I'm going to stick to it. If I have a friendship that's having problems, I'm not going to give up at the first sign of trouble. Heck, with my ex-girlfriend, a lot of people have said I gave her too many chances. Now, I don't want to pretend that I'm totally the innocent one, but I think if you had heard the full story, you'd probably say that I was a little bit too much of a prodigal father there. That's all I'm going to say for the time being. But basically, I want to keep this short and sweet because even by my standards, this is getting late. But in the span of just an hour, I heard 2 people, maybe it was 3, I don't know, 2 or 3 people on YouTube saying, why don't more ISTJs talk about ISTJs on their channel? And I just had to come out and say, why not just look at mine? I mean, it's not like I get paid for this, so it's not a plug. It's not, hey, give me your money. It's more so of, I want you to know about us. We're actually really fascinating people. Another thing that sort of saddens me about this behind-the-scenes approach to our type is when we're talked about in movies or video games, but the person talking about our portrayals often doesn't realize that we're ISTJ or mistakes us with an ISTP, because both of us tend to have that sort of edge in our voice, I guess you could say. ISTPs a little bit more so because their feeling is further down the line. And that's really unfortunate because ISTJs, when they're portrayed on fiction, however few of them there are actually some of the people that have helped me the most, because through watching how they handle an experience with my type of mindset, it often helps me go through a problem because I can say, this is how to solve a problem my way. I've mentioned my favorites on several occasions, but I'm going to do it again. Miles Edgeworth from the Ace Attorney series, Fi from the Zero Escape series, probably Neku from The World Ends With You. I think a lot of people think he's INTJ, but in my personal experience, his interactions with a character named Joshua kind of shoot that in the face, because he just seems completely overwhelmed by the prospect of intuition, and his blatant denial of the reality of what's going on around him at the start of of the game is just like classic inferior intuition and classic inferior introverted intuition. I mean, I certainly would have acted exactly the same way if I had had the experience he had. And he seemed to go off a lot of his past experience as like, well, this is why I don't trust people, almost as if he said like a I told you so type of moment. Also Emma Swan from Once Upon a Time, although I must say one area where I really can't relate to her at all is how much she lies. Like, ISTJs, generally speaking, don't tell lies. They like to say it like it is, and they say what's on their mind. Although the ISTJ connection becomes a lot more profound as the series progresses. So by the time you get to, say, seasons 3 and 4, you can really see the ISTJ connection in Emma. Even if she does things that I disapprove of, I can generally see her methods behind it, and I can generally say, like, yeah, I think I would probably do something similar if I were in that position, albeit without the lying. And I just wish we would get more recognition, like more people would say, this person is an ISTJ. That reminds me of the initial subject matter. Katniss Everdeen, one of the most ISTJ-ish ISTJs in movies, that somehow it completely slipped my radar that she was my type. Maybe it was because, but at the time I watched Hunger Games, I still thought I was an ESTJ because I'm outgoing. Guess what? Another ISTJ stereotype debunked. And I heard it was, I believe it was called Dominic Noble was the name of the YouTuber, and he was doing a video called Lost in Adaptation for the Hunger Games, and he was just talking about the depth of Katniss's mind and the psychological abuse she went through during the games. And it just struck me how much I resonated with that so much. Like Katniss's reserved nature, how she doesn't like showing her feelings on her sleeve. It's all so familiar, but yet she doesn't do everything exactly like me because she's in a different life circumstance. I've never had to like hunt to live and like scrape by a piece of chicken as my entire meal. Well, okay, maybe a couple of times I have had to do that, but for the most part, I haven't had the extreme life circumstances she has. I haven't been in a battle to the death arena unless you count laser tag, but that's not fatal, that's just a game. The Hunger Games had actual people dying and tortured and possibly being starved to death. But yet, in the basic fundamentals of how her brain worked, I could resonate with that so much, and I wish someone would have just screamed, Katniss is an ISTJ, you can relate to this. And I think, deep down inside, every Myers-Briggs type, with the possible exception of the ENTPs and the ENFPs, because they don't like being put in a box, that's the downside of their inferior introverted sensing, is the lack of compartmentalizing that we thrive on. I think every type except those two has a need to want to be understood, and not just want to be understood, but want to be like connected in some way, instead of just strictly being like, why am I so weird? Why is there no one else like me? It sort of reminds me of that song in Tarzan that says, I want to know, can you show me? Please tell me more about these strangers like me. He recognized the familiarity in humans when he's only been around gorillas his whole life. That's how I feel when I see other ISTJs in fiction. I say, they may not be exactly like me, but it's because they have different life experiences. They've grown up different. They've seen different things. ISTJs are all about personal experiences that shape them, not necessarily the objective reality that the ISTPs look at. And so I just want to say, if you're an ISTJ, put yourself out there a little bit. If you're afraid of the audience, just pretend that they're not there and pretend that you're talking to yourself. I mean, that's how we introverts are partiers, is we have parties inside our minds. So while we may be very quiet on the outside, on the inside we're a mile a minute. I'm pretty sure that's why I like to take naps more than the average ISTJ, so that I can have a chance to actually shut up for a change. With that, I'm getting the hiccups, and I don't want that to interfere with the video too much. So with that, thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and let me know who some of your favorite ISTJs are. Who knows? Maybe I'll have actually heard of them. Bye.